Hi everybody, this is Kevin and welcome back to another video. And today, I would like to share my thoughts on the original YuGiOh Duel Monsters anime series, which I recently finished rewatching. I started watching it back, I want to say in the middle of November, finished it around the middle of January, so about, 2 months? And I think it's 236 episodes. I also watched, 3 movies. The Pyramid of Light, Bonds Beyond Time, and Dark Side of Dimensions. I'll touch on them in this video as well. I don't know how long it's going to be. We're just going to talk about it, and however long it is, it is. And there probably will be spoilers here, so if you haven't seen YuGiOh, I strongly recommend it. For those who have, enjoy listening. Now, YuGiOh is a series I have watched in its entirety only once. I watched it on the Kids WB as it aired each Saturday morning, I think from 2001 to 2006. In Japan, I think it aired from 2000 to 2005, but, things are delayed with the dubs and such. And I loved it, man. I should do a whole, retrospective remembering the Kids WB, because I remember Saturday mornings as a kid. You had YuGiOh, you had Pokemon, Jackie Chan Adventures. There was Batman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond, because Kids WB, that was Warner Brothers and the DC characters. Static Shock. There were so many great cartoons there, as well as the anime series from 4Kids. I think Sonic X was on there, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so much great stuff, man. But it's been a long time. I do vaguely remember the way it was structured, where you would have, as an example, let's say Pokemon would be on at 9 a.m. You'd have last week's episode of Pokemon on at 9 a.m. and then the new episode at 9:30, and then 10 o'clock, the last week's episode of YuGiOh at 10, and then 10:30 the new episode, which is why I know for a fact, because as I was rewatching it here, I remember all these things. A quote that just comes to my mind right away is Bakura, "I invoke the power of chained energy," and then when Yugi duels against Yami Marik, "Shuffle well, Pharaoh," when they're shuffling their decks before their duel, because it's just so mimetic. So I watched the whole series back then. I've tried to rewatch it a number of years, and typically we'll rewatch the beginning through Battle City, because Battle City is just so good. And when people talk about the original YuGiOh, they do always bring up Battle City for good reason. Probably the best structured of all the arcs, but rewatching it and especially getting to the final arc, which has many names, some call it the Millennium World, some call it the Pharaoh's Memories, and then 4Kids calls it the Dawn of the Duel, whichever you call it. It is so good. It is so Kino, the way it wraps things up, and how that's what Kazuki Takahashi was building towards, telling the story about ancient Egypt. And that's how YuGiOh started before it became Duel Monsters. The original YuGiOh manga was all about Yugi. He would be possessed by the Pharaoh, the evil Pharaoh at that time, the Yami, which means evil. And he would play tricks on people and play all these crazy games, not just, Duel Monsters, the Yu-Gi-Oh card game that it has become, but all sorts of other games. And then it morphed into dueling, just because that became the most popular game and turned into that, telling the story. And I've seen interviews of Takahashi, rest in peace, God rest his soul, he left us way too soon, where he talked about how he was just fascinated by the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, which is what inspired him to tell a story like this. So we're forever grateful for that, at least I am. I love it. YuGiOh is one of my all-time favorites. And so, I would rewatch that, and then, rewatching the final arc, I'm just, wow, this is so good. The way everything's connected, and it's really a terrific ending. But as far as the structure goes, there's quite a number of arcs, including some filler arcs, and I dare say some of the filler is overhated, but some people really do respect the filler, especially the Orichalcos arc. I think they call it Waking the Dragons. And so the main arcs, it starts with Duelist Kingdom. And I like how the very first episode, it gives you a recap, which is narrated by Dan Green, the English voice actor for the Pharaoh. Well, actually, and Yugi. And that's how you can tell how great Dan Green is as a voice actor, and that he voices the Pharaoh, who is, "Draw! Kaiba, you're through! I summon Exodia, the Forbidden One!" And then he can do, "It's me, Yugi." He can do the voice like that, the way he can change his tone. You just know he's a great voice actor. But he tells the story long ago of the ancient pharaohs, which they changed that. There's a couple things they changed in the 4Kids dubbing. In the 4Kids, it's 5,000 years ago, but the original manga in Japanese, it's 3,000 years ago. But you have Duelist Kingdom. That's our heroes going off to face against Maximilian Pegasus. Oh, Yugi boy. Then you have Battle City. Well, actually, there's the filler arc there where they go into the MMORPG, and then they meet, which that's filler in and of itself, and then the real canon, if you will, which is in the manga, when Yugi meets Duke Devlin, who his name is Ryuji in the manga, and then Rebecca, who shows up later. Then you have Battle City, which gets broken up into 2 parts because halfway through they have the virtual world filler arc, which I like the virtual world filler arc. It kind of harkens back to the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga in that they have the card game battles, but there's more rules to it. You have the Deck Master, and that's the Big Five, the Jobbers Five as I call them, coming back to reclaim the bodies. Then Waking the Dragons, which is the Orichalcos and telling the story of Atlantis. Followed by Grand Championship. That's Kaiba's tournament he's holding, and his entrance in that one, so good. And then Capsule Monsters. With Capsule Monsters is an interesting one because 4Kids actually commissioned it after the series had ended in 2006 when they finished dubbing it anyway. And it's a 12-episode miniseries. Again, going back to the original manga, in that our characters kind of have like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon. They can summon little monsters like that. I thought it was a fun arc. People overhated it. I don't even know why. It was fun. And then the Pharaoh's Memories, followed by the Final Duel. Now, people hate 4Kids. I guess there's good reasons. You know, people meme on the fact that Brock and Pokemon called the rice ball or whatever, it's a jelly donut, you know, that thing. And I think when they dubbed the first early arcs of One Piece, what's the guy's name? I don't even know. Sanji, I think. He's smoking a cigarette, but they give him a lollipop in 4Kids. Well, the same in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's characters like Bandit Keith when he's attacking Pegasus. He's holding a gun, but, you know, they edit the gun out. There's other guys who are chasing after Kaiba with guns, and Kaiba, like, throws the card at him to jam the trigger. It's so funny. They edit that out there. But what I noticed, too, is they'll be punching each other, and they'll edit the punches early on, but as the series progresses, they, like, leave the punches in. Especially in the final arc when they're battling in Egypt and things are burning down. There's all sorts of violence. So that's kind of iffy. And even, like, I can remember people talking about, oh, they edited out the cleavage. Like, no, they didn't. There's plenty of scenes where you see Mai, her cleavage is out. Dark Magician Girl's cleavage out. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about there. And then the advent of the Shadow Realm, which that's a 4Kids invention. Pegasus does mention it early on. They're going to play a shadow game. But that's harkening back to the duels they had in ancient Egypt. And I think 4Kids handled that well enough for what they were trying to do. Because if you listen to any interviews with Dan Green and Eric Stewart, the voice actors of Yugi and Kaiba, they talk about how the way it was handled for it to air on a Saturday morning cartoon, they had to adhere to the FCC standards. And for that, I can't blame them because they really poured their heart and soul into these roles. They did a phenomenal performance. Everyone always talks about Dan Green and Eric Stewart as Yugi and Kaiba, but I'd also say Wayne Grayson as Joey Wheeler, or Jonichi, as he's called originally. And terrific job. But even Greg Abbey as Tristan Taylor, who is, what's his name? Hondo, I think, in the Japanese version. And what's the other girl's name? Amy Birnbaum as Taya Gardner, who's Anzu Masaki. They changed all their names, which, you know, I can respect 4Kids for that, too. Like, okay, they changed some names, but they left Seto Kaiba as Seto Kaiba and Yugi Moto as Yugi Moto. And then when you get to ancient Egypt, and you have Akhenaten and Akhenkhanen and Karim, and Ishizu's ancient counterpart is named Isis, which I think this was before, like, Isis existed. But you gotta remember, in ancient Egypt, Isis is one of the gods that they worship. Which is odd because Osiris, that's Slifer's original name. You know, he's another ancient Egyptian god similar to Ra, the sun god. And they call Osiris Slifer. But, you know, there's some inconsistencies there. For what it's worth, I think they did a phenomenal job. And putting it all aside, the performances from the voice actors, all terrific. And rewatching it as an adult, as a kid, I always loved the duels. But watching as an adult now, I really enjoy, like, the side banter with the characters where you have Tristan and Taya and all them cheering on. And even early on when Tristan has to rescue Mokuba and he's with Bakura, and Bakura's battling all the goons that are working for Pegasus. I'll talk about that in a minute. But he's battling the goons of Pegasus, and he starts summoning the monsters. And the way he starts talking, which Ted Lewis, he voices Bakura. I invoke the power of chained energy and the morphing jaw. And he just like goes so ham with his voice acting. And Tristan's like, dude, what's your problem? You mere mortals can't comprehend the fiends which dwell within my deck. And the way it foreshadows early on, like within the first 10, 15 episodes, when Yugi is dueling, or rather it's the Pharaoh dueling against the Spirit of the Millennium Ring Bakura, Thief King Bakura. And how that's so early in the series, and it all comes into the end. It's just great. So what happens is, I think everyone knows like the meme where it's the very first episode where the Pharaoh is dueling against Kaiba, and he summons the 3 blue eyes white dragons, which watching it now, they totally cheat with the rules. Like, they're summoning 8-star monsters without sacrificing. Like, dude, to summon a monster like that, you gotta sacrifice 2 monsters. You're summoning all these blue eyes at once, and they have 2,000 life points, but they eventually change it to 4,000 life points. But in all actuality, you should have 8,000. And I know why they do that is to speed things up. But, yeah. Draw your last pathetic card, Yugi, and he draws Exodia. I summon Exodia, the Forbidden One. Obliterate! And he defeats that. Defeats Kaiba and sets him free. And then Kaiba's scheming his plan to defeat Yugi once again. And then you have Pegasus learns that Yugi has the Millennium Item. Of course, Pegasus has the Millennium Eye. And they have that all going on, where you have Shadi appearing so early. And at that point in the story, Shadi not only wields the Millennium Key, but the Millennium Scales. And, you have all the different duels. I like how it goes back and forth, too, where you have Yugi dueling, and then you have Joey dueling. And, of course, they both get into the Duelist Kingdom finals. And Joey starts off, he has a pretty lame deck, but Yugi gives him Time Wizard, which, again, they don't use the cards properly because Joey will just summon Baby Dragon and Time Wizard. It's like, go, time magic! And then Baby Dragon turns into Thousand Dragon. For that to happen, use Polymerization, because Time Wizard's effect is you flip a coin, and depending on whether you call heads or tails, you destroy all the monsters or destroy your monsters. But it's fitting for Joey because that's his deck. It's just, Skull Dice, Graceful Dice, all the different dice, and Compensation Mediation. And there's the other card where you had to pick one of 3 cards, and then if you pick the right one, you get it. That was one of Joey's moves against Mai in the Waking the Dragons arc. But yeah, Joey, he's great. He's probably my favorite character in the whole series, honestly, just because you really see how he improves throughout the series, where he starts out not knowing what the hell he's doing, but he learns, and all throughout Battle City, he applies what he learns, because right away he loses his Red Eyes Black Dragon to the rare Hunter, and then he ends up getting even more powerful cards. He gets Jinzo, he gets Insect Queen, he gets Legendary Fisherman, and the Fortress Whale, which he never used Fortress Whale because when Mako gave him the 2 cards, he gave him Legendary Fisherman and Fortress Whale, but he didn't give him the Spell Ritual card for Fortress Whale, so that's probably why I didn't use him. But yeah, that whole duel of Yugi against Pegasus, like, I remember as a kid being on the edge of my seat waiting each week because it was a 5-part duel, 5 episodes, just waiting what's going to happen next, and then eventually the Magician of Black Chaos, and what did Pegasus have? He had Relinquished, and then the Thousand Eyes Restrict. And what I love so much about Karibo, and that's sort of like the marketing of the anime to get people to play the card game, and showing that like weak cards can make a difference, which is why Yugi always used Karibo, because Karibo has an effect. Again, they don't use it right in the anime. They cheat in the anime. But the actual effect of Karibo is if it's in your hand, you can discard it and then not take any damage that turn. So that's why Karibo always bailed Yugi out. Some really great stuff there. So eventually he wins. And I like the little side arc with going into the MMORPG that introduced the Big Five, because they were working with Pegasus. I don't know if that was manga only or anime only or whatever. Maybe it was anime only. Trying to overthrow Kaiba Corp, and even before that, you had the duel with Yugi and Kaiba again, where they're on top of the castle, and Kaiba's threatening to kill himself if he doesn't win the duel, and Yugi, doesn't attack and lets Kaiba destroy his Celtic Guardian, and that's when there was a great scene when Mai had a heart-to-heart with Yugi, saying, just because you lost one duel, you can't give up. You gotta persevere. And then that's when Taya dueled against Mai. But continuing on, you had the MMORPG world, which was great. And that's when they dueled against the five-headed dragon. And that was the first time I think we saw the Master of Dragon Knight, where Yugi summoned Blackluster Soldier and Kaiba had the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. They combined its 5,000 attack points, but it also gained attack points for all the dragons on the field and in the graveyard. And a cool thing too in the virtual world, when the Jobbers 5, the big 5, had Lord of D on the field so that the dragons can be destroyed by effect or whatever. So yeah, then they had Dungeon Dice Monsters, which that was some more marketing, I think, from Konami, just to sell another game. I remember the Game Boy Advance game, but I think they had physical versions of that game as well. Maybe they didn't do so well because you don't hear much about it anymore. Then the duel against Rebecca, which is fun, and you learn more backstory about Arthur Hawkins and his connection to Solomon Moto. And then finally Battle City, which is heating things up. I love the ancient Egyptian lore where it starts off where the Pharaoh and Taya are on a date. And a funny scene where Taya does the Dance Revolution with the one guy. What was his name? Johnny Steps was his name. Doing Dance Revolution. And then he starts cheating and the Pharaoh's like, I'll duel you. And so he duels him and kicks his ass. And they have a heart-to-heart. That's where they beat Ashizu. And they see the little inscription that they took from ancient Egypt, where it's a depiction of not only the 3 Egyptian god cards, but you see the Millennium Puzzle, and then someone that looks just like the Pharaoh, as well as Kaiba. That would be the Pharaoh and Priest Seto, who we'll meet much, much later on. But again, the subtle foreshadowing that continues. And so you meet Ashizu, and she gives Obelisk the Tormentor, the card, to Kaiba. And you also get a lot of great lore throughout that season, where it goes back to Pegasus, where, because Pegasus created the card game based on the hieroglyphics, and then when he created the Egyptian god cards, it ended up killing people because they couldn't wield the power. Only the chosen few could wield the power, which are those connected to ancient Egypt. Ashizu, Kaiba, Yugi, or the Pharaoh, Marek, etc., etc. And you get the return of Bandit Keith, who's possessed by Marek. And I love that too, how Marek has all the rare hunters doing his bidding, and they all have some pretty badass cards. And then it cuts back to Marek constantly on the boat, like, wait, my Pharaoh, I'll be there soon enough, you're through. And the first really badass duel, well, actually, they're all, in Battle City, they're all badass, honestly. But yeah, Joey gets his ass kicked by the rare hunter who steals the Red Eyes Black Dragon. And then Yugi duels against that same rare hunter who has an Exodia deck. In that case, he has I activate Pot of Greed, which allows me to draw 2 cards from my deck to my hand. There's a funny video, it's like 3 minutes long, of every time a character activates Pot of Greed, and without exception, every single time they say it differently, whether it's I activate Pot of Greed, draw 2 cards, or I activate Pot of Greed to draw 2 cards from my deck to my hand, and they over-explain it. It's so funny. But Yugi defeats him with Light Force Sword! And using... that's the thing, just thinking about it again, the way they do these duels, and the way they write them to explain that you don't need, powerful monsters, you just need, good magic and trap cards, and swords are revealing light, and it's so cool. But then, another great duel is Yugi versus Arcana in the dungeon, where they use, the dark energy discs, which in the original version, they're just saws, going back to season 0 in the original manga, where if you lose the duel, the saw will chop your leg off. But in this case, no, you'll be sent to the Shadow Realm, which again, we talked about that earlier. It works for the way 4Kids handled it. I think it's fine. And that's where you see the evil dark magician who instead of wearing purple, he's wearing red or whatever. And that's when Yugi summons Dark Magician Girl, which he uses, Arcana uses a magic card, like the Dark Magic Cloak or something, which allows him to summon another Dark Magician, because he already used one. I think he had 2 or 3 in his deck. And with Yugi, he uses the same spell that Arcana used, which again is against the rules, but he uses it anyway to summon Dark Magician Girl. And her effect, of course, is she gains 300 attack points for Dark Magicians in the graveyard, your graveyard, but in the anime they make it so it's his graveyard as well. So her attack gets more powerful. It's 2,600 points. And great to see number one waifu. Boy, as a young man, when I saw Dark Magician Girl, I knew. Which I knew with Mai and Taya, but especially with Dark Magician Girl, because she is so sexy, man. So you got that. And then eventually, when he was dueling against Strings for Slifer the Sky Dragon, and the way he won with that, first of all, you get to see Buster Blader, another complete badass, which eventually creates Dark Paladin, the ultimate magical knight, in a much later duel. But the way he's able to outsmart Strings, because again, Slifer's ability is that it gains 1,000 attack points for however many cards you're holding. So, you know, you hold 5 cards, 5,000 attack points. And then its other effect is when a monster is summoned, his second mouth opens to destroy them. And what Yugi used, or the Pharaoh, different characters, he's the Pharaoh, he ended up using Brain Control to take the Revival Jam that Strings had, and he had all these different trap cards. So, like, if you attack Revival Jam, he comes back, Slifer's ability activates, etc., etc. But he used the ability against him so that Revival Jam would keep being attacked, and Strings would have to keep drawing cards until he drew his entire deck. And once you draw your entire deck, you lose. So that was the way to outsmart him and also show how powerful the Egyptian god is to win on a technicality like that. And then, of course, you have some more duels with Joey and Weevil, which was great to see because, of course, Yugi dueled against Weevil in the first season, and then Joey's dueling him now, showing him what he learned, and Weevil was playing tricks with Parasite, but Joey's able to persevere with Gearfried, the Iron Knight, which his effect, those equip abilities don't work, the equipped spells, so Parasite didn't work, and he attacked, he won, and then one of the great duels of the first half of Battle City is when Marek takes control of Joey, and both Joey and Yugi duel each other, and Yugi doesn't ask for the Pharaoh's help because he feels that, you know, while Joey knows the Pharaoh, he has more of a close relationship with Yugi. So they decide to duel like that, and one of the most badass moments early in the duel is when Yugi activates the magic card exchange. So you both get close and you look at each other's hands and you take, you know, one of each card. You exchange cards. And Yugi was holding the Red Eyes Black Dragon and Joey was trying to take back control. It's like, no, it's the Red Eyes Black Dragon. Yugi needs that. And he's fighting for control. And then he takes card destruction instead in a completely badass moment. And they keep fighting. And then eventually Serenity, which that's Joey's sister. Of course, in the first season, he was fighting to win the prize money to give her the eye surgery, and now she's fully healed, and she comes back, which there's a whole nother side plot. Remember, I talked about the different side plots early on, where she's with Tristan being chased by the goons from Marek, which, let me talk about that right now. So, like, it's so funny to me how they call these people the goons, which back then, that's what we call it, like the bad guys, a bunch of goons. But now you hear the word goon and you think of something else. It's like, what happened that became the case? Like, really, what the fuck went wrong? Because when I say goon, I'm talking about, like, those ruffians over there. But anyway, the goons are chasing after him, and Tristan's fighting him, and then Duke shows up, like, he throws his dice at him, and he saves the day. And then Mai shows up in her convertible. It's like, get in, kids, we're going to save the world. So, and then Serenity shows up, is able to save her brother after he snaps out of it, which that was crazy too. Like, you talk about the 4Kids censorship, but they had Taya as well held captive, and she was sitting underneath this crane, and the rare hunters in the crane, like, if any of you do this funny business, I'm gonna drop the crane and crush Taya, kill her. I'll send her to the Shadow Realm. It's like, wait a minute, I thought we were censoring shit. But yeah, YuGiOh is actually pretty dark. So, you know, they eventually save the day. There's another funny duel where you have this guy, what the hell is his name? Like, it was a parody of Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he's trying to steal Mai away. But Mai perseveres, and they get ready for the finals. And there's 8 finalists. Of course, there's Yugi, there's Joey, there's Kaiba, Ishizu, Marek, Odeon, and Bakura. Oh, and Mai. I'm forgetting Mai. So the 8 finalists all show up, and they have it so that Odeon is pretending to be Marek, and Marek is Namu or something. Like, those fools have no idea what's in store for them. I'm gonna betray them. So early in Battle City, there was also like a truce between Marek and Bakura, and that they'll work together to try and retrieve the Millennium items, because Bakura thinks it'll be easier to claim them for himself later, and Marek only wants the Millennium Puzzle. So there's the villains working together, a great little subplot there. And the first duel turns out to be Yugi versus Bakura. And everyone thinks that Bakura is Bakura, not the spirit of the Millennium Ring, to which he uses it, and he's like, we're going to enter the Shadow Realm! And he activates Dark Sanctuary to summon the Dark Necrophia, and then eventually starts playing his ultimate card, Destiny Board! I activate Destiny Board! Which he gets to F-I-N-A, and just barely made it. But Yugi prevails with summoning Slifer the Sky Dragon, defeating Bakura, which there's another duel later on, where Bakura duels against Marek. But this time, that was when, you know, Yami Marek took control. So the good Marek was with Bakura, and they're dueling together to reclaim the body. And then Bakura loses, but he embeds part of his spirit in the Millennium Puzzle, which isn't important until very later in the story, which is just so good. But yeah, there's all sorts of great duels. You have Joey versus Odeon, which Odeon, he doesn't really use any monster cards. He has a bunch of trap and magic cards, and right away he has all these cards face down, swords are revealing light, and then he activates the trap cards, the embodiment of Apopus, which are the trap cards that turn into monsters. And eventually, Joey is able to summon his 3 really powerful monsters, which he won. Jinzo, nullifying all the trap cards, Insect Queen, and then the Legendary Fisherman. And Marek tells Odeon to use the Egyptian God card, and Odeon's like, no, Master, I can't use it, it's too powerful. But he uses it, he gets struck by lightning by trying to summon Ra. And Joey gets struck by lightning too, and they're both lying on the ground, and Roland, that's one of Kaiba's associates officiating the duel, is like, no, don't enter, because Tristan's like, no, we gotta get Joey up, don't interfere, there's a duel going on, they both got struck by lightning, but this is a duel, and Kaiba's all, this hocus pocus nonsense. He keeps saying something about the hocus pocus nonsense, and eventually Joey gets up, and then Odeon's passed out for a long time, and you have another subplot where Odeon, all the flashbacks are so great, but Odeon was the one keeping the evil Marek at bay. Of course, they're all sibling. Well, Ishizu and Marek are brother and sister, and Odeon was the adopted brother into the family there. And they're the tomb keepers of the pharaoh, entrusted with the Millennium Rod for Marek and the Millennium Necklace for Ishizu. And Odeon is Marek's caretaker, and Marek's like, yeah, fuck the pharaoh, I want to see the outside world, which harbors his evil side, and he eventually kills his mother and father, sending them to the Shadow Realm, but he kills them. And so Odeon's trying to keep the good side at bay, but then Yami Marek takes control, and then you get some more duels where you have Marek versus Mai. He sends Mai to the Shadow Realm as well. And some Riona action in my 4Kids YuGiOh, where he uses like these monsters to pin Mai against the wall. It's like, what the hell? I thought we were censoring this shit, but let me tell you, again, as a young boy watching this, I was a changed man. So Maya's taking control, but then she eventually gets the Wind Dragon Aurora, but she can't summon it because she has to chant the ancient scripture, which she can't read ancient Egyptian. But Kaiba can, and he's like, what the hell, this hocus pocus nonsense? And then Kaiba duels Ishizu, and in that duel, Ishizu has the Millennium Necklace to predict the future, but Kaiba sees a vision of the future, and despite Obelisk being more powerful, he's like, fuck it, I sacrifice my Egyptian God card to summon the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and he outsmarts Ishizu by subverting her prediction and summoning the Blue Eyes White Dragon instead, which again, we'll explain that connection in the final arc once we get to it. So, great duels right there. Then, Kaiba wants to duel where the original Kaiba Corp was, where Gozaburo Kaiba was. And so they go there, and that's the filler arc for the virtual world, where our heroes get trapped in the virtual reality thanks to Noah and the Big Five. And what I love about that arc is as our heroes are trying to escape, it constantly shows Marek, like, looking around the airship like, where have those fools gone? I grow tired of waiting. He's just running around like, those fools. So, our heroes overcome that. And some really great matchups there where you get to see some new strategies and some new cards. You eventually get to see Yugi and Joey teaming up to take on the Big Five, which they took over Tristan's body. It shows how vulnerable they are because, well, Taya actually holds her own. She has Dark Magician Girl as her deck master, and then is able to, because Yugi gets close to her, she can activate a magic card that summons Yugi's Dark Magician. It's, again, they pull rules like that in the anime, and she perseveres. But then you have Serenity, who's never dueled before, and she means to summon a monster in defense, but puts it in attack mode anyway. And then Joey against the Judge Man, who is rigging the verdict, if you will. But he perseveres. And then you get Yugi and Joey teaming up to defeat the five-headed dragon once again, the Jobbers 5. And then another badass moment where Kaiba is dueling against Noah. And he's losing. And he has like 100 life points left. And Noah turns into stone. And then the Pharaoh shows up. And he's like, I'll finish the duel for Kaiba. And then he defeats Noah. And it's just so badass because not only does he take over where Kaiba left off of 100 life points, but he has Kaiba's deck. And so he eventually summons the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And it's just so awesome. So, and then you get the duel with Kaiba versus Gozaburo Kaiba, his father, and you get more backstory of Kaiba's past and who Noah really is. And the duel there is Gozaburo summons Exodia Necros, which gives Kaiba a flashback to his first duel against the original Exodia, but Kaiba defeats him. And he does like the same expression that Kaiba did when he was defeated in the first episode. So they escape, and we get the final rounds where the first one is Joey versus Marek. And Joey is going to defeat Marek. Like, when he summons Guilford, the Lightning, which Guilford's ability, you sacrifice 3 monsters and you destroy every monster on your opponent's side of the field. And with Ra, one of Ra's abilities, you can turn your life points into Ra's attack points, and he goes into Phoenix mode and he attacks. And because it's a shadow game, Joey is taking the damage in real life. You know, these aren't just holograms. It is hocus pocus nonsense, as Kaiba would say. And Joey gets up and he's like, he draws a card. It's Geoffrey, the Iron Knight. And he puts it on the duel disc, but he collapses. So if Joey would have just called out his attack, he would have won. But he didn't. And then you get probably my favorite duel of the entire series with Yugi versus Kaiba. The 6-episode duel where they're going at it. And you have the ultimate struggle where Yugi summons Slifer, Kaiba, Obelisk, and then sends him back into ancient Egypt. And you get like a cameo of Kasara, which again, that's later. So, really good stuff. And then Kaiba activates a card where they have to throw away their entire deck except for 3 cards. So they really have to think there. But Yugi's still able to persevere and defeat him with Dark Paladin, the Ultimate Magical Knight, which is a fusion of Dark Magician and Buster Blader. So then you get Yugi versus Marek, and again, a great duel, and again, one of my favorite moments, because now Yugi has Obelisk and Slifer, but he doesn't need them. Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, and he uses the magic card, Activate Ragnarok, which he destroys every monster in his graveyard and deck. He banishes them for them to destroy the monsters, and then Marek, the good Marek, goes back to normal, and they save the day, and they all have a truce where, you know, Marek, Ishizu, and Odeon are back together, which that was during the duel. Odeon woke up, and he came to the duel and saw it firsthand, and the characters all see each other off. Mai wakes up, and it's a beautiful ending. Battle City really is probably the best arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I like the final arc quite a bit. But Battle City, when people talk about how great it is, it's so fucking good. So, our heroes are sent off, and that's where you get Waking the Dragons, which actually, after that, you can watch Pyramid of Light, which is a movie, and I enjoy it quite a bit. You have Kaiba duel against Pegasus again, and then you have Anubis, the True King or whatever, and the Pyramid of Light, and then Yugi's able to prevail with the help of Kaiba. And then you get Waking the Dragons, where they go to the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic in the museum, but that unlocks ancient Atlantis and darts and all the monsters are roaming free. And it's so funny because they're talking about how the monsters, it's a hologram malfunction. And Kaiba's like, no, the duel just worked perfectly fine. It's not a hologram, they're real duel monsters. They're real, Kaiba. You gotta believe the hocus pocus nonsense. So that's when we meet not only Darts, but Raphael, Alistair, and Valen, which I thought were great characters. And a really interesting note, I talked about the important voice actors early on, but the voice actor for Duke Devlin is named Mark Thompson. And you can refer to Duke's voice. He's like your typical anime voice actor. But then you have Raphael, also voiced by Mark Thompson, and he's like, it's me. Listen, Pharaoh, it's me, Raphael. And he has this really deep voice. It's so good. I love it. So they activate the new card, the Seal of Orichalcos, which again is completely different in the anime than it is in the actual card game, but we'll let it slide. And if you lose the duel, your soul gets swallowed up. And again, with the monsters actually being real, you get a confrontation with Yugi and the Pharaoh with Dark Magician Girl, where she actually speaks. More on her as Mana later. And you have to unleash the legendary dragons, Timaeus, Critias, and Hermos, which are really the legendary knights, the Knights of Atlantis, which are turned into dragons. And then our heroes go forth. There's all sorts of great duels there where you have Mai as a villain now because, you know, she felt that her friends weren't really there for her, even though they were. I mean, Serenity was by her side the entire time, and Jelly was always fighting for her. But it's just how the cookie crumbled. So you get Evil Mai, who's voiced by Erica Schroeder now. She was voiced by Megan Hollingshead in the first few seasons, but she got recast as Erica Schroeder, who would go on to voice, well, Mana later in this series, but Aki or Akiza in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. So, yeah, Waking the Dragons, fantastic. I love the finale at the end where you have Yugi and Kaiba teaming up, and, you know, Joey's duel against Valen, that's another one of my favorites, where he summons Lord of the Red, which is like a ritual version of Red Eye's Black Dragon. And Jelly wears it as armor, and they have like a tokusatsu battle where Valen's wearing armor as well. It's so cool. And Valen, because they both like Mai. Like Jelly likes Mai, and Valen likes Mai too. But in seeing, and before this, you didn't really see what Mai saw in Jelly before she turned evil. But in seeing this, and seeing how much Joey's fighting, he's like, wow, Wheeler, you got a good heart, kid. And he concedes defeat, and, you know, his soul gets swallowed up. And then Joey duels against Mai, and he puts up a pretty good fight. He's like, I'm still standing, Mai. Come on, Mai. And, you know, he does the same tricks. I love how Mai calls him out because, you know, he's got, I activate scapegoats. You know, before scapegoats show up, I activate Grave Robber. You know, cards that nobody uses in actual, you know, dueling. Maybe they used them back then, but nowadays, I activate Scapegoat. But Joey, he's our Joey. How could you hate Joey? He's fucking awesome. So, good stuff right there. And then the Pharaoh losing to Raphael because he took the Seal of Orichalcos when Yugi said not to, and he used it anyway. It should have been me, not him! Which spawned a famous meme. And then you even get a duel with Duke and Rebecca teaming up against Valen early on as well, which I thought was cool to see the two of them dueling, because you saw the one duel of Yugi versus Rebecca early on, and then you saw, well, Duke versus Joey, and then you also saw Duke in the virtual world, but you see some more of that. So it's always cool to see the other characters and their strategies. I like that quite a bit. And I like the little, I guess, tension going on, because Rebecca likes Yugi, but Taya likes Yugi too, but does Taya like Yugi or does she like the Pharaoh? Nobody knows. And, then there's a great moment too with Kaiba where they're talking about how Kaiba Corp is getting bought out and Pegasus is going to buy it or Darts is going to buy it. And then he's in the computer doing the research and he's like, rumor has it that this corporation owns a small piece of every corporation in the world. And it's, oh, what is that referring to? But they mentioned that. And then, oh no, it is true. Darts owns Paradius. And Eric Stone is just going so ham as Kaiba. I freaking love it. That's why people say, oh, I hate the dub. What are you talking about? The dub's fucking great. So yeah, our heroes prevail. And it's funny too because, you know, Wayne Grayson voicing Jelly. Yeah, it's me, Joey. But then he voices Darts. I activate the Seal of Orichalcos. You know, and he voices Shoddy as well. So they save the day. They get the legendary dragons. They see it through, and then we get Grand Championship, which is another filler arc. And I like how it picks up there because, you know, they were with Professor Hawkins and Rebecca, who had a camper, and it's like, well, how do we get back? We're in America now because they traveled over the entire world. And they eventually make their way back because Kaiba and Mokuba are holding a tournament, but Kaiba is not going to be participating because he's looking for something. And so everyone's participating. They see this suspicious character in Siegfried von Lloyd, which eventually it's Siegfried von Schroeder. And Leon, that's the other one. That's his younger brother. And he has like this German accent. It's so good. And I think Joey duels... Well, Joey duels against Grandpa Moto first, which is like Agnarb is his name. It's Grandpa spelled backwards. Agnarb or something. And they're like, who is this guy? We don't know. It's like, dude, you can't tell it's Grandpa Moto? But Joey defeats him with his old trusty Gilfa, the Lightning. And Grandpa is so happy because of how much Joey learned. And then Joey eventually duels against Siegfried, which he puts up a fight. And then Siegfried's making fun of him because it's always, you know, the dice cards that Joey uses. But Joey's like, that's how I roll. It's a game of chance with me. And he almost wins, but he doesn't win. And then Siegfried is set to duel against Leon, which Leon defeated Rebecca. And Kaiba shows up in his helicopter. Stop the duel! As president and CEO of Kaiba Corp, I declare this duel invalid! And he duels against Siegfried because he discovers his identity as someone who wronged him in the past. And he's going to duel him instead. And an epic duel where they're going back and forth. Siegfried has all these effects with his monsters and his magic cards. And I think Kaiba has maybe 1 or 2 cards left. And I think it's only 1 card, actually. And one of the cards that Siegfried has in effect is you have to declare how many magic cards you're going to use. Otherwise, you lose life points or something or other. And so Kaiba draws, and he's like, I'm going to use 4 magic cards. And Siegfried's like, what are you talking about? You only have 1 card in your hand. And he starts right away, I activate Card of Demise, which allows me to draw 5 cards, as long as I discard my entire hand in 5 turns. And then he plays a bunch of other cards, including the Dimension Fusion, which takes all the banished monsters, which he had like 5 of them, back from being banished onto the field, which are the 3 Blue Eyes, Luster Dragon number 2, and like Chaos something or other Dragon. And he does all these attacks, and he's able to defeat him with Blue Eyes. And then you get Yugi in the final duel against Leon, and all sorts of great stuff. And that wraps things up there. Then you get Capsule Monsters, which this would lead right into the final arc, but, you know, I watched Capsule Monsters because that's how it's supposed to go, which is just another game harkening back to the original series. And our heroes get transported. They get isekai'd into another world, which I think it started off where they won a trip somewhere. Joey won a trip, and they end up going there. The animation looks better. I think it's all done by Gallop, but it looks better here because this was the 12-episode miniseries that was commissioned. And they end up getting these sort of Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh! Like monsters that they can summon. And what I liked about this is not only are Yugi and Joey involved, but both Taya, Tristan, and Grandpa Moto are able to use their monsters as well. And you get Joey with Baby Dragon. He's riding on Baby Dragon's back. It's so fun. And the villain ends up being Alexander the Great, which is also a person who had the Spirit of the Millennium Ring. So it's just funny how everything's connected that way. So our heroes eventually prevail. There's a really sad moment where the little monsters, it was Baby Dragon, Thunder Kid, and then the Happy Lover, which was Taya's monster she summoned, where they all sacrificed themselves to protect Grandpa Moto, and especially sad seeing Baby Dragon like that. But they prevail, they end up going back, and we get the final arc, which the final arc starts similarly to how Waking the Dragons began. Now Yugi has every single Millennium item, as well as the Egyptian God cards. But what happened was, of course, Weevil and Rex show up, which they actually, I didn't even mention that earlier when I was talking about Waking the Dragons. I'll mention it now. This is after Yugi's soul was swallowed, and the Pharaoh said, "It should have been me," where he duels against YuGiOh, who now has the seal of Orichalcos, and he ends up summoning Breaker, the magical knight, which he has another magic card, Berserker Soul, where as long as Yugi keeps drawing monster cards, he can attack Weevil's life points directly, and that's another famous meme where he goes, "Draw! Monstercardo! Draw! Monstercardo!" And he attacks, even as Weevil loses all his life points. So, but yeah, Weevil and Rex show up again. There's also a flashback where you get young Solomon Moto exploring the tomb of the nameless pharaoh, which he's voiced by Mark Derison in that one episode, which Mark Derison also voices Kareem, one of the high priests of the pharaoh. But Mark Derison probably most famous for voicing Guts, as well as Tokiomi Tosaka and Akihiko Kayaba from Fate Stay Night and Sword Art Online. But you get that, and then our heroes end up going back to ancient Egypt because, you know, Bakura shows up. He steals the Millennium Ring thanks to Rex and Weevil, and they end up going there. The Pharaoh goes back. He has to relive the past to regain his memories so he can be at peace. Because remember, he fought a battle 5,000 years ago, or the original manga 3,000 years ago, but he erased his memory because of all the horrible events that transpired, and so he goes back, as well as Bakura, because he stole the Millennium Ring as well, and he sees all these people who look like familiar faces, like you have Shibone, who looks just like Solomon Moto, you have Priest Seto, wielder of the Millennium Rod, looks like Seto Kaiba, Isis, who looks just like Ishizu, Shada, who looks just like Odeon, which Odeon, his original name was Rashid, but they turned him into Odeon for some reason. Akhenaten, who wields the Millennium Eye. There's Mahad, the wielder of the Millennium Ring, and so on and so forth. Like Kareem with the Millennium Scale. So many great characters there. I love the designs of all the ancient Egyptian characters, and so good. But then Thief King Bakura returns, and he has Diabound, which, before he returned even, he was dueling against Kaiba. And he actually gave Kaiba the Millennium Eye. It's like, "See for yourself, Kaiba. All will be revealed in due time." And, you know, Kaiba has the Millennium Eye. And he's like, "What the hell's going on? I don't believe in this ancient Egypt hocus pocus nonsense." But he will believe. And so our heroes are worried because, you know, we gotta be there for the Pharaoh. So with the help of Shadi, Yugi, Taya, Joey, and Tristan all go back to ancient Egypt. And as they do that, they learn more and more of what's going on and how our heroes in ancient Egypt have the duel monsters before duel monsters existed. And for instance, you have Mahad, who wields the Illusion Magician. And he has a one-on-one duel against Bakura, to which it's really testing his limits. And he fuses with the Illusion Magician to create the Dark Magician. And that's why Yugi, his most trusted card, has always been the Dark Magician, because his most trusted servant there, Mahad, is the Dark Magician. And then you also meet Mana, who is the student of Mahad, who also summons a spirit of her own, the Dark Magician Girl. That's why there's so many cards, like the bond between teacher and student. That's relevant to Mahad and Mana, Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. But so many great one-on-one duels there, where Yugi's able to summon the Egyptian god cards, and that's really thrown everyone for a loop, because back then the Pharaoh didn't have those powers, but now he does. He just doesn't know his name anymore. And really terrific battles. You have Akhenaten, who gets corrupted by all these ancient powers, because it's revealed that Akhenaten, the Pharaoh's father, was the one who created the Millennium Items, and in doing so, destroyed Bakura's village, murdered everybody, and used their souls to create these powers, these Millennium Artifacts. And you also learn about Kasara, the Maiden with Eyes of Blue, which is also a card, and how she's the wielder of the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and how Kaiba is in love with Kasara, and eventually inherits the power of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. And just, again, so many great battles. Our heroes eventually show up, and they're able to help the Pharaoh. You get another final duel with, not the Pharaoh, but with Yugi versus Bakura, which Bakura took over Tristan's body, which I think is kind of mimetic to what happened in the Virtual World arc, how Tristan's body was controlled by the Big Five. But the first time you see Yugi's new cards, like the gear cards, and Silent Swordsman and Silent Magician, and the one dragon card he used, and he defeats Bakura on his own, and then our heroes are able to save the day. The ultimate evil is revealed as Zork Necrophades, or as it's called in 4Kids, Zork the Dark One. I don't know why they don't call him Zork Necrophades, because that's his name, but Zork the Dark One. And that's the other thing too. They're called the High Priests, but in the 4Kids they call them the Sacred Guardians, because we can't have religion. The High Priests of Egypt. So our heroes prevail in an epic battle against Bakura and Zork. Kaiba eventually gets sent back there because, he has the eye, and he keeps seeing visions of Priest Seto and Kisara. So he shows up. Ishizu, Marek, and Odeon help him go back to ancient Egypt. He summons a fucking dual disc and is able to bring forth the Blue Eyes White Dragon in that realm. And then eventually the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And then the 3 Egyptian god cards all combine to create the ultimate being of light to finally defeat Zork. And a terrific ending where the Pharaoh, now known as I am King Atem, and he gives the title of king to Seto, which that was the whole deal with Akhenaten Khanen. His brother was Akhenaten, the father of Seto, and after all that happened, the Pharaoh Atem agrees that Seto would be the rightful pharaoh, and then time can move again. And while this is going on, you have Yugi and Bakura in the dark RPG world playing their chess pieces, and Bakura is like, I have these hourglasses to stop time, reverse time, and then Yugi has his own, which is this, ancient Egyptian pharaoh head, if you will, which summons this being known as Hassan, the protector. And then Hassan is doing one last act of good, and his headpiece is destroyed, revealing him to be Shadi. Which again, Shadi, we know him from the very beginning of the series, and it's just great how everything goes full circle. So our heroes save ancient Egypt. Seto is now crowned the pharaoh of Egypt, and everyone goes back to normal. But for the pharaoh's soul to truly be at peace, there must be one final ceremonial battle between Pharaoh Atem and Yugi Moto, and they have their final battle. A really emotional string of episodes. I think it's 5 more episodes where our heroes are just all sad that the journey's over. You have Taya, who doesn't want to say goodbye to the Pharaoh, and you have Joey, who's like, I should duel the Pharaoh because I've grown much stronger now. But it has to be Yugi versus the Pharaoh, and even Seto agrees. And then they're like, well, why are you still here? You don't believe this hocus pocus nonsense. He really does, but he's pretending not to. And they have their battle. Everyone's watching, where you have, the friends from Domino City, Seto and Mokuba, Ishizu, Odeon and Marek, Bakura, Grandpa Moto, even Duke and Rebecca and all of them show up. So they're having the duel, and the Pharaoh is able to quickly summon all 3 Egyptian god cards, and Yugi has Valkyrian, the Magnet Warrior, which he uses to separate into Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, and with a string of magic and trap cards, the 3 Magnet Bros are able to defeat the 3 Egyptian god cards. And then Yugi prevails, eventually using the Silent Magician. And when the Pharaoh summons both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, they appear kind of as Mahad and Mana, which is so cool. But Yugi's able to prevail. It's a really terrific heart-to-heart scene where Yugi's crying, but as the Pharaoh's walking away, he's giving the thumbs up. It shows, the whole group, and it's terrific, man. It's so good. And then our heroes say goodbye, and it just ends with them in Egypt in the English version, but in the Japanese version, you get the credits with Overlap, the final theme song, which, the Yu-Gi-Oh! 4Kids theme is fine enough, like, yo, move, Yu-Gi-Oh! But the other Japanese-only openings and endings, so good, especially Overlap, the 5th and final opening. And you get to the end, and it really, man, watching this and even talking about it now, I know it's kind of a rambling mess, but just reliving it, as I remember the past 2 months or so. It was a really enjoyable experience, and I'm so glad I decided to rewatch it because I just love Yu-Gi-Oh so much. After I finished watching the final episode, I was just beside myself because I spent the past 2 months, 236 episodes rewatching this series. It's so good, and I don't know if it's a combination of both because I watched this as a kid, so I hold it dear to my heart that way, or, revisiting it as an adult, as I mentioned earlier, appreciating more of the other scenes aside from the duels, because there's so much more than the duels. And the amount of times they invoke the power of friendship. I love the power of friendship trope. It is one of my all-time favorites. And anyone who hates on it, I guess, I don't get it. I really don't get it. Maybe it's overused, but to me, especially when it's done well, it is so good. And so, after this, I decided to watch the other movies, Bonds Beyond Time, which, that one, I don't know if you even call it a movie, because it's only 50-something minutes. And that's more, I think you should probably watch that when you're watching 5Ds, because the way it's presented is Yusei is the main protagonist. I believe it celebrated the 10-year anniversary, or maybe it was the 15-year anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh! It was some kind of anniversary film where they had a crossover of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. But Yusei is the main protagonist. You see Jaden, or Judai, as his proper name is, as well as Yugi. And along with Yusei, he gets most of the character cameos. You have Jack, you have Aki, and the others, Crow, and so on and so forth. And the two, I forget, the one's name is Leo. I forget the girl's name with the green hair. You know what I'm talking about. And then with Judai, you have Yubel, and then Neos, the one elemental hero Neos, or whatever it's called, the 8-star monster. I think it has 25 attack points. And then with Yugi, you have, Yugi and the Pharaoh, Grandpa Moto, and then Pegasus. And the villain, Paradox, is trying to rewrite history, going back in time. And so there's time travel shenanigans. And it starts with Judai, I believe, and then goes to 5Ds. And he's taking everyone's most powerful cards, like the Stardust Dragon from Yusei. And then our heroes all converge. They all use their most powerful cards, like Stardust Dragon, Elemental Hero Neos, and Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, of course. Which, I gotta say, it's all Gallop doing the animation. They've always done the animation for Yu-Gi-Oh! But Dark Magician Girl looked extra fine. Oh, and Yubel, that's Judai's, I don't know if it's really his card. It's just kind of like the spirit of Yubel. Because, what was that, Season 3 or Season 4 in GX? But yeah, I enjoyed watching that. It makes me want to watch GX and 5Ds even more now. Because I love the original Yu-Gi-Oh! I haven't seen anything after 5Ds. I've only ever seen Yu-Gi-Oh! GX and 5Ds. Nothing afterward. I don't know, like, how those series are. Maybe I'll watch them, but at this point, I would very much like to rewatch GX as well as 5Ds, especially because with GX and 5Ds, they never dubbed the final season of both of those series, which is quite a shame. But GX I remember fondly. I really enjoyed them. GX used to be on Cartoon Network, and then 5Ds was on, not Kids WB, it was on like the Toon's Eye channel. And they still had all the 4Kids voice actors, but 5Ds in particular, Greg Abbey, who voiced Tristan, went on to voice Yusei. And then Ted Lewis voiced Jack. And then Cassandra Lee Moore, she got her start with Yu-Gi-Oh! She voiced Yubel. And the green-haired girl from 5Ds. I forget her name, though. So, and then after that, I watched Dark Side Dimensions, which, that's like a 2-hour-long movie. Absolutely fantastic. Beautiful to look at. And that, I think, celebrated the 20-year anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh! And just this year, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm older than Yu-Gi-Oh! I can't even believe it. Not by a lot, but I am older than Yu-Gi-Oh! So, that was great to see all our friends again. All the characters, all the voice actors returned to reprise their roles. I have the Blu-ray of Dark Side Dimensions, and there's bonuses, interviews of Dan Green, Eric Stewart, Wayne Grayson, Amy Birnbaum, Ted interviews of all of them. So I watched them too. It was great to hear that. And just especially seeing Taya in that yellow outfit. My goodness. But I love the new designs too of Dark Magician. Instead of having like the blonde hair, he has black hair. And then Kaiba wanting to duel against the Tem again. Great stuff. So, yeah, what more can I say? I love Yu-Gi-Oh! I strongly recommend it. you know, I spoiled the whole series, but I take it you've already seen Yu-Gi-Oh, which is why you're watching this. If for some reason you haven't watched Yu-Gi-Oh, I can't recommend it enough, though I don't know if I'm blinded by nostalgia or not. I like to think that, you know, again, I watched this as a 10-year-old kid, rewatching it now as a 30-year-old. I think it's better now, rewatching it. And even, like, the 4Kids dialogue that people say, oh, it's cringe, fuck 4Kids. No, I love the 4Kids dialogue. It's great. I loved it. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And stay tuned for more videos coming soon. Everybody have a great day, and peace out.
99.